ക്ഷണം സ്വീകരിച്ച് നമ്മുടെ മുഖ്യാതിഥി ഇവിടെ എത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. മുഖ്യാതിഥി ശോഭ തരൂർ. ശോഭ തരൂരിനെ ഇൻട്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്യാനായി ഞാൻ ഉഷ ഡോണിനെ വേദിയിലേക്ക് ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു.
എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലായിരിക്കും പറയുന്നത്. First of all, I would like to thank LANA and Sargavedi team for giving me this opportunity, especially to introduce Shobha ji. So, Shobha Tharoor Srinivasan is an award-winning author of a dozen books published in India and the USA, as well as celebrated voiceover artist who received the Best Narration honor at the 68th National Film Awards in India 2022. Her distinctive, mellifluous voice has brought life to documentaries, educational programs, journalistic initiatives, and audiobooks, including her own stories. Her literary work spans fiction and non-fiction for all ages, with titles such as Indie Alphabet, that's Mango and Marigold, winner of the Purple Dragonfly Award for Cultural Diversity, and It's Time of Rhyme, that's Up, which received Publishing Next 2022 Best Children's Book of the Year, that is for age 8+. Her acclaimed biography, Prince with a Paintbrush, the story of Raja Ravi Verma, published by Westland, was selected by Beyond the Box Kids as a 2022 Best Book of the Year and was featured as a clue on the TV show Kaun Banega Crorepati, which is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in Hindi. She has written rhyming picture books such as Parvati the Elephant's Very Important Day, published by HarperCollins, and adult non-fiction like Good Innings, published by Penguin. Her work tackles a range of themes from environmentalism in Sandalwood Story, that's Wonder House, to idiomatic expressions in Look Before You Leave, that's published by Westland. And her stories had been widely anthologized, excerpted in school texts and translated into Malayalam. A frequent speaker at literary festivals and panel discussions, Shobha ji has been profiled in magazines, featured on radio and television, and even had one of her stories performed by Silicon Valley Shakespeare in California. Before embarking on her literary and voice career, she spent 2 decades as a non-profit development professional advocating for and fundraising on behalf of people with disabilities. So with all that, Shobha ji, I welcome you.
It looks like you've all had a lot of fun for a couple of days.
Yes, we did.
And we're moving now from the sublime of Abel and Cain to the playground of children's literature. Thank you so much, Usha, for that lovely welcome and a very generous introduction. Appreciate it. I'm afraid I'm going to have to speak in English. My Malayalam skills are limited. ഞാൻ ഒരിക്കൽ കേരള കൗമുദിയിൽ 45-minute interview കൊടുത്തു മലയാളത്തിൽ, but it was a lot of repetitive words and it definitely went reasonably well, but I can't say that I can carry a long speech in Malayalam with any degree of fluency like you're used to these last couple of days. So today I want to talk to you about a subject that's close to my heart. Since I'm a children's author, primarily a children's author, though I have made forays into adult short stories in anthologies as well as poetry. I'm going to talk about children's literature. Is it education or entertainment? And I'm going to speak about it for about 20 minutes probably, and then open it up to questions so that you can all dialogue with me, because that's the best way for all of us to get to know each other. So let me start. Betty Botter bought a bit of butter. The butter Betty Botter bought was bitter. So Betty Botter bought a bit of better butter to make the bitter butter Betty Botter bought better. Good evening. Did you enjoy that? I start my conversation with you today with a tongue twister that I promise you I learned when I was a child in school. And I'm doing this to make a point. When words are used cleverly, are fun to hear, and sometimes deliver a meaning that resonates, the words stay with you. So many decades later, I'm continuing to deliver this little ditty with flourish. Of course, there are other values to tongue twisters. They exercise your mouth muscles, which is always useful for a professional voiceover talent. They help you pronounce words carefully and with precision, and they engage your brain as you memorize. I've designed my talk today as an introduction to the varieties in the vast world of children's literature, and as a discussion of whether children's writers should keep the goals of education or of entertainment in mind when they write. And I'm going to use 4 of my own books to illustrate this point. Some of them have a Kerala connection, which is why I'm going to speak about these particular books. I've written, as I said, and published so far 13 books, and there are a couple more coming out this year. But let's start with Parvati the Elephant's Very Important Day. This is Parvati the Elephant's Very Important Day. It's a classic picture book, which, you know what, a picture book has a very particular definition, not just in the United States, but also in India. It is a book that cannot be more than 1,000 words. It must have illustrations on every page so that the non-readers can follow the narrative. So the idea is that the pictures can tell the story to a child to some degree, even if they cannot read the book themselves. And it's essentially so that non-readers, as I said, can follow the narrative. Now, I've chosen to present this particular short adventure story of an elephant's interesting day in a Kerala temple as a rhyming picture book. This is because infants and preschoolers, the usual recipients of picture books, respond more easily to music and rhyme and repetition. For non-readers who are read to, the cadence of the rhyme scheme will be musical and appealing. An infant who's listening to the sound of a parent first responds to the rhythm and the sound of the voice. And I'm sure you're all aware of that. You've all probably read books and stories to your children when they were little, or to your grandchildren. Later, it's the repetitive words in the text which is heard. As the child begins to read, this book, which has only a few words of text on each page, can be read by the young reader. Still later, an older child or an adult can use the book to discover new cultural traditions, can learn new words, go beyond the pages to discuss elephants, animal welfare, the care of the planet, and more. So what I'm saying is that even in a traditional picture book, the book's readers can turn to the book at different stages of their reading journey. And I've anthropomorphized the elephant so that little children can connect and empathize with Parvati. Parvati is excited, she's nervous, she's fearful, she's tired, she's joyful, just as they are often. And they are thus able to connect with Parvati the elephant, and it makes the book more interesting and fun to read. The complementary, vibrant illustrations further engage the little child's attention and imagination. Since I knew adults would be curating the selection of the book for their child, I've provided a scaffolding with the story in my author's note so that answers to questions that may arise are provided. For instance, I use literary license when I use a female elephant to carry the tiramba, which I know breaks with usual festival traditions that utilize male tuskers for this task. That's my literary prerogative, and when I'm at schools and book readings, I'm also able to discuss gender roles with children. Let me emphasize, children's books are not static. They're always springboards for further discussion. This book, for instance, children ask about, it introduces 10 Malayalam words in it. I describe the orchestra, the Panjavadyam. I talk about the Nettipattam and all these other costumery that the elephant wears. So it's an opportunity for children all over the country in India to also familiarize themselves. An elephant is a very beloved animal all over the country and all over the world. I mean, my children have been taken from America and always been excited. We've been to Africa where we've seen elephants. They're amazing. They have they live in sort of joint family systems. So there's all this opportunity to discuss many other things about elephants by just reading a children's picture book. And so as you saw, this book is both entertaining and it's informative. And just because there is learning, it doesn't mean that the book is not a delight. Books for pre-readers and early readers are usually introduced to the child by a parent, a teacher, or a librarian, and the added learning element to the book makes it that much more relevant to adults. So that's how I dealt with Parvati the Elephant's Very Important Day. Now I'm going to take you to a book that I wrote that is in prose, not poetry. And it's still in keeping with our theme, should or does children's literature educate or entertain? It's a collection of stories called A Treasure Trove of Timeless Tales. Now this was something that, one of the publishers had asked me to do. They had wanted me to rewrite a lot of our children's classics, not children's classics, classics from the past, Panchatantra, Aesop's fables, etc. And it was something that I wanted to do with a bit of a difference, and that's something that I've always had the opportunity, especially with publishers in India. They give you the sort of free rein to do things the way you wish. And I've been fortunate that I've been published by all the big publishers in India, so there's an opportunity where, because they all have marketing budgets and sales budgets, they take you all over the country, and it's a great opportunity to talk about the books as well. So it was published by Westland Red Panda. This is the book that was translated into Malayalam by Manorama Books. I don't seem to have the Malayalam copy to show you, but these are all available, by the way, both in India and as well as on Amazon. A Treasure Trove of Timeless Tales is a collection of short stories. Some are retellings, and some are original stories from my imagination. In putting this book together, I presented a collection that goes beyond a simple retelling of parables or classical tales. I tie the stories thematically together in two ways. The stories are all from the past, whether they are traditional classics that I've retold, or they are original stories that come from my past and imagination. Secondly, the stories, which are from many corners of the world, build on the idea that we are one world with many stories, but we're also one story that surfaces with small variations in many parts of the world. For instance, I discovered when I was doing research on telling stories from different parts of the world, that the story of Ison Boshi from Japan, which is in this book, and I retold, is a very familiar narrative. It's a variant of the story of Tom Thumb from English folklore that I read as a child. It's also a variant of Thumbelina from Danish Hans Christian and Andersen that my children read in their youth. And this is a similar story of a little miniature person set in Japan. So just look at how we're all part of the same world in so many ways. That our narratives, all of us are storytellers, and our narratives all have this sort of universal human theme. Many of us say the same stories and have said it, even in the old days in the oral tradition. This similarity is also seen in Aesop's fables and the Panchatantra stories, which use animals in the narrative to teach life lessons. And there's always the big quandary, which came first, the Aesop's fables or the Panchatantra, correct? Of course, in India we say the Panchatantra stories came first. But there's so many of the stories are the same. But what I did with this book is I use 100-word stories in this book. I write some, and then I invite readers to compose their own stories. The idea is, it's a good writing exercise. It's like Flaubert said, mot juste, which means the perfect word. Knowing how to use the right word, how to reduce a sentence that may be too many words into a shorter, pithier phrase, perhaps by using adjectives or adverbs, can help you reduce your word length. You can also expand your word length by being a little bit more descriptive. So these are all good, challenging ways to encourage children to learn how to write as well. So what I was going to say is that it invites readers to compose their own stories, so there's an element of interaction and follow-up activity as well. While the book delighted readers with the narratives, it also provided a springboard for discussions, writing, and more. Thus, the book went far beyond the entertainment value. Sometimes, as I say, I used to read a lot of James Hadley Chase when I was a teenager. Once you've solved the crime, the book is put away, and many of them, after a while, all the books seem the same. the stories all sort of had, unless they were literary crime dramas, many of these stories, you can forget about them and leave them away. Children's books, on the other hand, and truly I mean that, can be read again and again. And the discovery changes with each reading as well as with every age. That is true whether it's a picture book or whether it's a prose book, whether it's short stories, whether it's poetry. Now, I'm going to show you the sort of variety of the kind of books I write. The next book that I wanted to just show you is this poetry book that Usha also mentioned, and it's called Time to Rhyme, Poems for Kids of All Ages. And this is that book. And what's interesting, when I say it's for kids of all ages, I've discussed this in libraries and schools all over the place. I've had parents coming to me. I've had men come saying, we're engineers, we were never introduced to so many different poetic forms when we were growing up. I've had people saying how much they've enjoyed it. I've had teachers saying they use the book to teach. And many of the poems in this are part of, Macmillan Publishing and a lot of education publishers. They've excerpted sections of it for their curriculum. Now, the reason I wrote this book is poetry, like mathematics, unfortunately sometimes, has an image problem with children. And I had, when I was here and my children were in 5th grade, and my daughter was in 5th grade, I did a volunteer session for a Lyceum program called So You Want to Be a Poet or something. And we did this one-day workshop where we talked about poetry writing. And children all came in saying that they didn't like poetry, all composed poems and went out of it feeling wonderful. And I do workshops on poetry as well in India when I go to festivals. Sometimes my festival appearances at the children's festivals are workshops. And kids have always enjoyed it. So the idea is, if you make it fun and not sort of concentrate on just the mechanics of poetry writing, the rhyme scheme, the strictness of it, it is something that they enjoy. And even if there is particular form, as I show in this, and I'll just read from you what I said, they speak of poetry as opaque, as using figurative language, as not being easily understood, as being rule-driven in terms of structure. Prose, on the other hand, is presented as straightforward and simple. So kids say, I would rather read stories. It's true that information is often compressed in few words in many poems, so children do have to pay attention to the words they read in order to glean the meaning. But as I show in my book, It's Time to Rhyme, poems can be fun to read and easy to understand when they present relatable ideas and thoughts in simple ways. So I want to read to you a little bit, because what I've done is I've introduced 9 different poetic forms. I mean, this book, Usha mentioned it, won a very, very big award in India. It was Publishing Next Award for ages 8+. And, it was a big thing at the Pragati Maidan and all of that. I wasn't there, I was in the US, but it got a lot of press, it did well. And I'm very grateful for that, because it really is a very unusual book. And the reason I say that is I introduce only 9 different poetic forms. Some of them are complicated forms, like a villanelle or a sonnet. Some of them are simpler, like a haiku, or when I say simple, it's not to put down that a haiku is simple, but what I mean is the form is 3 lines and it has a very specific meter. So we have, haikus, we have a limerick, which is again fun for children to write. I have acrostics, which you see in all these, Hallmark cards, and children write it very often. Can you hear me? No. I'm sorry. Were you having difficulty hearing?
No, good.
Okay. I thought I had a loud voice. Anyway, I apologize. It was too much to the side. So I'm going to read to you the sonnet in iambic pentameter, which is just what I've done, and that's what I wanted to say, is I introduce the form of the poetic form in the form of the poetic form. So for instance, if you listen, the sonnet has an octave and a sestet. It's an iambic pentameter and it's 14 lines. Because those are rules. Yes, it's true that you can have more than iambic pentameter. There are sonnets written in tetrameter. You don't have to end with an Elizabethan couplet, but those are getting to higher levels of sonnet. But a sonnet has to be 14 lines. A sonnet has to have an octave and a sestet. So it does have very specific rules. But what I've done after introducing the rule of the form is that I have written an accessible, entertaining poem that children really resonate with, and it is in the same form as the form that I've introduced. So that's where the cleverness comes in, as they say. So let me just read to you the sonnet and the example poem so you can sort of hear the difference. Sonnet in iambic pentameter. The sonnet is a simple poem. Its length is predetermined at the start. 14 lines in total, not a long tone. The octaves 8, the sestet 6 apart. The first 8 lines may rhyme quite easily. The next 6 lines may change repeatedly. Though the meter can vary, I'll show you some sonnets have 5 long beats through and through. Milton, Dante, and the great bard as well, with thoughtful words of life and death did tell. This form they used to express sentiment. They spoke of love and war and merriment. The sonnet is an interesting find, just 14 lines to speak what's on your mind. So I've introduced to you what is a sonnet. Now here's the fun poem. When Mummy was away, I packed my own lunch when Mummy was out, with sweets and treats since she wasn't about. Took out the salad, threw carrots away, put in some cookies, a packet of Lay's, filled up my thermos with sweet 7-Up, joyfully dreaming of fizz in my cup, pulled out my sandwich, added some cake. This was a great lunch, I made no mistake. But something went very wrong with my plan. You don't want to look in the garbage can. Through recess I lay on the ground in pain. I'll never try packing my lunch again. All that sugar gave me a tummy ache. Junk food for lunch is a major mistake. So, now that was funny, wasn't that? And the kids really love it. So when they see that they can use a complicated sonnet form and yet write something about what they want to write about, that appeal for poetry blossoms. And that's in some ways what the success of this particular book is. Poet and scholar Joseph T. Thomas makes a distinction between official school poetry, written by adults and prescribed for children, because it's a model of good literature, and poetry of the playground, that captures what children often do with language while outside grown-up supervision. When we read Wordsworth or Tennyson in school, we studied many of the literary elements in the poems. But later, with Shel Silverstein, in poems like The Polar Bear and The Frigidaire, does anybody remember that one? We saw the hilarity of the playground and the nonsense that young readers delight in. Even today, Polar Bear and The Frigidaire is a favorite with my grandchildren. There's a polar bear in our Frigidaire. He likes it 'cause it's cold in there. With his seat in the meat and his face in the fish and his big hairy paws in the buttery dish. That's all I remember, but we can look it up. It's really laugh out loud funny, and it's such a delight. And children, if you introduce them to that kind of poetry, the rhythmic cadence, the music, the musicality of words begins to appeal to them. It's Time to Rhyme is similar. It tries to broker a compromise between what children want and what adults want. In this book, I described 9 poetic forms, just like I said, like the sonnet, the villanelle, a diamante, a nonette, by writing the poem in the form that explains the rules for the verse. And then, as I said to you about sonnet and iambic pentameter, it had an octave and a sestet. And then we did the poetry of the playground when we wrote When Mummy Was Away. What I do in this book, therefore, is to teach poetic form, but frame the poems in ways that make them universally appealing. The book thus has appeal for teachers and parents as well as for children. As I said in the introductory poem to the book, I'll show you how far the English language can go to make learning fun and rhyming more so. This was not a textbook. Once the poetic forms have been shared, the second half of the book is full of amusing poems on themes that will resonate with children. So once again, children's books can be both entertainment and education. And truly, in so many ways, that's part of my mantra. The final book that I'll discuss, and again it was mentioned by Usha, is this little gem of a book called Prince with a Paintbrush, The Story of Raja Ravi Verma. It's not a picture book, it's not a collection of stories, it's not a poetry reader, but it's an illustrated biography. Now, my purpose in writing this book was to tell the story of Raja Ravi Verma and introduce this great Indian artist to young readers. Raja Ravi Verma's art is in the public domain, so we don't have any copyright issues. You can take pictures from his art, put them into the book without having to go to some place for clearance. Children who I spoke to, in my travels, both here and in India, seem to know who would, could recognize a painting of Mona Lisa. They would say Leonardo da Vinci painted it. If you talked about Ravi Verma, nobody knew it. And this is even our own Malayali children. And I grew up in Kerala where we didn't afford and we didn't have many original works of Raja Ravi Verma in my Tharoor, but we had many, many lithographs and pictures of it, and especially of the Puranas. And in one of the rooms, the entire wall had, Jatayu Vad and, all of those incredible stories, Shakuntala, Nala Damayanti, those pictures from those that he had painted from those stories. And the pictures were actually springboards for storytelling with my, Mutashi and my Ammai and, all of that. We used to sit down and this is how we learned our stories. So it was very keen for me, keen that I share some of his stories with children. But biographies are not exactly exciting for children most of the time. If you did it as a traditional linear story with dates and facts and just pictures, children wouldn't be excited. This book is very special in some ways because I wrote it with a double narrative. And so what do I mean by that? I have a double narrative as I wrote the story as though a young child is discovering who is Ravi Verma. And in the course of the discovery, the child's thoughts are in little comic bubbles in the book. So the child is saying, oh, Ravi Verma got married at 18 to a 12-year-old. Thank God I don't have to get married and times have changed. Or Ravi Verma, traveled all over and did all these paintings, but he had so many people to carry all his things. So, if we had all this help, maybe we could also be better painters. Or the child saying, oh, I scribbled on Ravi Verma scribbled on the wall and his mother saw it and that's how she took him to, she recognized his artistic ability. And the child says, oh, if I paint on the walls, I get a nice thappad sort of thing, So these kind of thoughts of the child is also in the book. And so it's, as I said, a double narrative. And that narrative is something that really resonated with children. Because believe it or not, children voted this as Best Book of the Year in 2021. And they had been introduced to 12 books. It was some program called Beyond the Box. And they were given 12 books to read. And this one is the one they picked. And they said the reason they picked it is because they learned a lot. But it had fun facts at the back, which I put in. Kilimanur is where he was born. It didn't even have a post office. But because Ravi Verma was getting fan mail and other mail from all over, a post office was set up in Kilimanur just for him. In some ways it started because of him. So, all these little interesting fun facts that children thoroughly enjoyed. So if you can bring in the entertaining elements to even things in which you learn, because obviously this is non-fiction. This has to be researched, even though it's not a scholarly book, it needs research, it needed facts, it needed dates, it needs specific things that somebody could challenge me if I made up dates and when he did what he did, right? So there is the educational and the learning component, but there is also the entertaining component. So anyway, I sort of went off my script a little bit, but it was essentially to tell the story of Ravi Verma and introduce the great Indian artist to young readers. Now, I wanted, for instance, for children to be able to recognize a picture of Galaxy of Musicians. Do any of you remember that beautiful painting?
Yeah.
It's in this book as well. It's the painting in which he traveled all over India, and we have a whole group of women with different instruments and different ways of wearing the sari, different earrings and jewelry and all of that. In a sense, it's like a painting of national integration, but it's a very beautiful painting. And it's called Galaxy of Musicians. And as I said, or Jatayuvad. I want children to be able to look at that and say, hey, that's Ravi Verma, and be able to recognize it. And in many ways, they don't even know this until I brought that fact in as a fun fact, is a lot of our Amachitra Katha comic books has the art that's really bright and vivid. A lot of that is sort of based on the style of painting that Ravi Verma did. So, it's again something that you can learn from. And because Ravi Verma had a printing press with his brother, he did a lot of lithographs, especially of gods and goddesses. It made art accessible to everybody in India in a way that it wasn't before. So, for so many reasons why he's worth learning about. So, I'm going to conclude by saying, to go back to, is children's literature entertainment or education? I'd like to believe that my books educate children and also help them think critically. I want my books to spark conversations and offer a place of new understanding and discovery with each reading. But I also want children to return to my books from time to time, which they will only do if the book is enjoyable, amusing, and interesting. So, as children's writers, we take our responsibilities pretty serious. We have to take the responsibility of writing for children very seriously because we would like them to come back to our books, or we would like them to pick up our books in the first place. And in order to do that, we have to reinvent ourselves as well. I have a new book coming out in June in India by HarperCollins, and it's called Use Your Words. And it's a book that has poems and stories and essay and a lot of grammar, but written in entertaining ways with poetry and games. So it's an interactive book. There's a poem called the alphabet poem, and each page from A to Z has a game that children can do. So the book is something that you can dip into. People talk about children being distracted too much, not having, the patience to do sustained reading. In some ways, a book like this is something you can dip into at different times of your reading time. In other words, you could go in, you can play with reading the alphabet poem, play some of the games in it, come back later, read a poem about parts of speech. The book will be useful for schools, but it's also fun for children. So, as I said, in many ways, this is children's writers reinventing themselves as well. Nothing is static, kids' books are not. So as I said earlier, children's books are not books that one reads and keeps away after the story is done or the mystery is solved. There are so many dimensions to writing in children's literature and so many new ways of looking at the text and the illustrations. Each of my books have what I call a takeaway as well as a call to action or an interactive element. I want my books to have different appeal at every age in the reading journey. The great Czech writer Milan Kundera, who passed away in 2023, said that his lifetime ambition was to unite the utmost seriousness of question with the utmost lightness of form. Perhaps that's a worthwhile goal for all of us in the field of children's literature. Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions that you have. Yes?
I have a comment and also a question.
Yes.
I think we just introduced ourselves. My name is Sukumar. I'm from Canada.
Yes, wonderful.
My comment is about the Ravi style.
Right.
If you ask ChatGPT
Right.
to make a painting in Ravi style, and if you prompt it properly, it will output a painting with that style. So I have tried
I know,
that.
I've heard. No, I haven't
it may not
tried
be
that.
perfect, but it is. Actually, I put my own picture and said, do it in Ravi Verma style, and then, I look much better than what I look now. So that's one thing. The second, I have a question is, you said you have books with 100 words or less for kids, and I have seen some books in which you can actually put the kid's name on it, and then you can make the story run around those kids. Have you done any of those?
No, I don't do that. But when the children were little, I paid the big bucks to get my kid's name in a story. But the stories are very limited. If you were to use that particular tool and get your books done. You know, Anant went to whatever, or Ragini's adventure and
I saw that with the,
It's the
American
same
Life.
story. I mean, other than there's no difference at
No,
all.
for example, the Parvati story, this elephant story.
Yeah.
If I have a granddaughter or somebody with the name Indu,
Yeah.
and Indu is meeting Parvati, I was just thinking about it as you.
No, I mean, if the story has merit, then if we put our children being part of that story, that sounds
Do you think
exciting.
it's a gimmick?
But no, I think it's a gimmick.
It's a-
I mean, it's still, gimmicks are also fun for kids to see their name. But I think it's in some ways having characters in the story in which the child can identify is as exciting as having their name in the story.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
So
you.
that's one
Thanks.
way. Yes,
I have one question.
Sure.
So wonderful. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
the great speech.
I hope you all heard me. I
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
realize.
Yeah,
that.
it's a small room. Where,
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So it's a tremendous responsibility to write children's fiction because you're introducing ideas to children, very formative when they're in their formative years, right?
Correct.
So in that regard, I have a question about the first book that you introduced, the elephant book.
Yes.
So in some ways, you are breaking the mold with the gender bender, the
Correct.
comparison, the elephant being a she elephant.
Correct.
But in another way, are you not perpetuating a stereotype with the elephant being a captive elephant and the fact that you're introducing
So-
that to children?
Absolutely. I mean, there's lots of criticism even about the treatment of elephants in South Indian temples.
Yes.
So the reality is, there are many conversations we can have with this book, but this is a picture book, and the idea of sharing this story was for children to feel a sense of responsibility. Children are going to be the stewards of the planet. Our days will be over soon enough. But the kids are our future leaders. What they read today is how they think tomorrow. When they identify with an animal, they feel a little closeness to the animal. And very often they do. So, I'm answering one aspect of it. I'm absolutely not denying that there are many stories. In fact, I deliberately wrote about an elephant rather than about, a hippo or some other story, because of, that horrible story that I read about the pregnant elephant that died
Yes.
eating the pineapple
Yes. Later.
that farmers had put out.
Yeah,
Now,
firecrackers.
that's really, it was a very upsetting story, but I thought, how do we get children to feel this connection with the planet, with animals, with...
True, all true, but I just...
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not.
We can agree to
disagreeing.
disagree, but I just...
I'm not disagreeing with
Yeah.
you that captivity is not good. But what this story is actually celebrating a few different things. One, that the elephants think the way we do as well, that they feel the way we do as well, that they can also be excited, that they can also be frightened, they can also be scared, all of those things so that children connect with the elephant. So that was, and all of that is shown in this book, because the little adventure is like that. Secondly, I wanted to introduce that females can do what any male can do as well. And we very often talk about that because there are some children who are smart, or their parents have told them, oh, we heard in Kerala only the tusked elephants are carrying, it's always a male that carries the deity on their forehead. And so I said, well, but don't you think that the girls in your class, can't you do what the boys in your class do? And we have these gender conversations, which is really lovely. Yeah.
That's not true. I think
That's not
certain
true,
temples,
Yeah.
only she elephants are allowed.
Every day.
Even Pichu,
Devi
Oh,
temple.
you eat Taskulla elephant and the main
I know.
leader of the
They're not
procession.
allowed in that small forest in
in a
Oh.
way,
They're not allowed.
they are,
So they are
they
breaking
have
that.
higher value because
No, the
they look
female
more majestic.
elephant does have higher value. Like when I went to Africa, for instance, it's ultimately the tuskers are sort of banished after they've done their job. It's the female.
Oh,
it's
in a
basically
natural setting, yes, of
Yes,
course.
yes.
I'm talking about the captive setting
In the
in
captive
Kerala.
setting, yeah.
The tuskers have more value because they look more regal, they look more
Yeah,
majestic.
exactly,
Yeah.
But
exactly.
certain temples, they
There
are
are-
not allowed,
Okay.
There are-
Okay, great. Well, that's good to know. Yeah.
especially Devi.
Thank you. Devi temples. Okay.
So on a children's book, pictures are so very important. So in addition to your words, pictures put 1,000 words
Well,
out
only
there.
in particular books. So, for instance, a picture book, which is what Parvati the Elephant's very important day, is a picture book. That has to have pictures on every single page.
Ah.
And the reason is because it is for non-readers as well.
Oh, okay.
And so, if you look at the pictures, you should be able to follow along with the story without reading the text. Kuttiyail ingane nokki kayna, they should be able to tell what is the
That's what's
story.
happening, okay.
So if the illustrator is good, when you turn the pages, you can see the elephant running away, you can see the elephant having a shower. You know, the things that I'm talking about is all visible in the illustration. But if you're writing other children's books, definitely you don't need pictures for those.
Oh, it's nice.
Yeah.
So you work with the artist, and you may have
Well,
some
yes and no. You know, people, it's a little overrated, but I can tell you a secret. I met the artist of this prose book for the first time. The book came out a few years ago. I never even met this person because the illustrations were just whatever she felt like. There's no illustrations. It's a kada pustaka. So she had a cover and she put in 1 or 2 pictures like this inside. I didn't need to meet her at all. And I went to a festival and this lady came up to me and said, "Oh, I illustrated your book." And I said, "Which book?" You know. And then she told me. So do I work with the illustrators? When I did Parvati, I did have back and forth because they weren't able to, she didn't draw the Panjavadyam properly, the 5 different, so I had to Google and send picture images for her to copy. It was a North Indian girl, but she's done a phenomenal job, beautiful job of illustrations. So usually the publishers have their own illustrators. Either they're in-house illustrators or they have contracts with illustrators. So I don't, the writer doesn't need to bring in the illustrator.
Their own imagination, right?
Harry is a great
Their own
illustrator.
imagination.
No, it's not always their own imagination. They have to follow whatever I've written. Yeah, but it's their own skills and their own abilities. Yeah.
You know,
But
Harry
you-
is a great illustrator himself.
Oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
I do for
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I did a book called, it's interesting, this Parvati book is done by a North Indian girl, has done the illustrations, but it's so beautifully done. I did another one called Sandalwood Story, which is a story of trees, again as a picture book, under 1,000 words, and it's an ecological story. It uses 3 trees, actually it uses 4 trees to tell it's sort of a metaphor for our own confidence and self-confidence and our own worth, the fact that there is unity in diversity. So I have a little bit of a political theme in almost everything I write because that's just who I am as an individual. But it doesn't, that's only if you want to look deeper into the stories. But this particular story, Sandalwood Story, is essentially an opportunity for you to learn about a coconut tree, a sandalwood tree, a banyan tree, and a peepal tree. But the trees also essentially show, ultimately in these 2 trees that are a little scared, build confidence because sandalwood tells them that it doesn't matter, it's not about size, because banyan tree is showing off. And it's not about size or height or bigness or whatever else it is our inner worth. So ultimately that's the lesson of the story. But the story is also an opportunity to learn about trees. So, you know, you have this wonderful large white canvas in some ways to be able to tell stories to children. If you have an idea, and in many ways, children's books are the great sort of space in which to do it. I remember meeting Anand Nilakantan at one of the festivals. We were on stage together at a panel, and he said in front of everybody, "Shobha, I want to say, I think writing children's books is much harder than writing books for adults," because he had just written a children's book. And you know, he's a very well-known man. He writes these scripts for television, and he's extremely well off, and he's certainly a celebrity, not like me. But he was saying that, you know, you have to think, it's such a responsibility because what you've written is something that they're going to take away with them, and so we have to be careful about how we say it. Any other questions?
So this is not a question. I just want to make a statement.
Sure.
A very simple statement.
Yes.
While I was sitting here and listening to you, I was thinking in my younger days, it was somebody like you who wrote the small stories for me, not knowing me. I did not know them,
Oh.
but it was to read the greater books, the classics later in my life. It was their writing where I started. I didn't get a chance to see them or talk to them or give a word of thanks.
Yeah.
So in the name of all those people that I never saw and whose work I read, I respect you. I want to
Thank you
extend
so
my
much. That's very kind.
respect to you.
Thank you. Yes.
I have a question. So what was the moment like you decide I want to be a writer for children, writing children's books? That would be my
You know what happened is I was working in non-profit development, and after a while you get burnout when you're in development because essentially it's a lot of working hard to sort of tell a story. That is also telling a story. All of my life has intersected both as a voiceover talent as well as a non-profit. It's a long answer, but essentially I was telling stories about people with disabilities programs getting money in for the organization, and I was sort of burnt out and wanted to quit, and my brother decided to go back to India from the United Nations and cast his hat in the ring, as they say, to be to join the political fray. And he was given many opportunities to join the upper house, as they say, the Rajya Sabha, but he said he's going to actually contest. And so I used that as an opportunity because, as I said, I was a little burnt out of non-profit. I thought I'd do something different. Wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I quit and flew the next day to just be there as family support. I can't cast a vote in India because I'm an American citizen, but I can certainly be a family support. And my mother was there, and it's an exhausting process. I mean, unless you go through it, the election campaigns in India are it's a whole other animal in some ways. It's much more difficult physically, I would say, than probably what people are doing here in terms of campaigns. But anyway, so I went there and I came back after he won. I mean, actually before he won, I came back after the election season. And I was thinking, I want to write stories, and I had many ideas because I'd written many stories that I would, just throw in a drawer, and I was to tell the stories to my children. Reading in books and words has always been part of our life. That's how people of my generation, we didn't have the distractions that many others have. We didn't have, TV came to our house when I was 12 years old or something. So, and it was all Doordarshan, Kisan programs and things like that. So, we were entertained by storytelling and by poetry and by books. We went to the library, brought books and finished them and went back and got more books. So it wasn't just my brother, it was all of us. We were very voracious readers and writers, and we played word games, which is why I told you the new book, I've got all these games in it. Many of them are word games. They're fun games that we played. And so I think the storytelling impulse was always there. I like poetry the most, but I didn't start out writing poetry. I've written many of the poems that are in this book, but putting it together happened later. So I think it was quicker to do it, the children's writing, than sort of work on a large chapbook for adults or whatever. I do work in the adult space as well. I mean, I wrote the book about my mother, which is not for children. And I've written, I have a short story in an anthology, I have some poems in literary journals. So I'm sort of working now in all spaces. But children's books, once I started, they started resonating, and I really enjoy interacting with children. And what's been really special for me is that because I published my first few books in America, and I never self-published. They were published by publishers in America, but they were small publishers, so in Boston, in Texas, and they didn't have huge sales budget, marketing budget. I had to run around, taking it to a school or to a library or whatever, and that requires a lot of effort. Whereas I discovered when I sold the first book in India that when you sell with HarperCollins or Penguin or Westland or any of those big publishers, they have a huge budget, they have marketing, they have sales. So I go there, they're picking me up, they're taking me here and there, I'm going to schools. There's a lot of excitement in the success of the books as well. And so it's sort of a wish-fulfilling prophecy. And when children come back to you and say, they've been writing poetry because of my poetry book, or they've been writing stories, or they had a fun 100-word story exercise, it's its own reward. And that's how I get writing. Thank you. Are we done with our hour? We're done with the hour, right?
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I have to give with your permission, I would like to give this book
Thank you
to
so
our
much.
speaker. And this is Ramayana in 30 days, published by Guruvayur Devasam, with lots of pictures by Dr. Krishna Kumar, who is a mural artist and chief of the director of the mural school in Guruvayur. So
Thank you so
that
much.
would
That's
be-
really lovely. I
that'll be
look
great.
forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's in English.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
this is beautifully
yeah,
placed.
it's actually they have done a
Really
great.
nice.
You know, I initially published in Amazon on my own.
Ah.
And when they saw that,
They said they wanted to-
yeah, one and I gave them the copyright.
Let me, at least let me give you this book then. I'll have an extra copy at home if I may.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. Do you
So
have
that-
this? You don't?
No, I don't.
I'll sign it for you.
Oh, please do.
I'll do that.
I have signed it with my email also.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
maybe after
Can you stay
the.
back to what is there?
Oh, she's
Okay, thank you so Shobhaji. You are bringing, I don't know what to say, lots of inspiration and hope. Hope for our great grandkids. I am just sitting there and visualizing, because we are going to lose all this, right?
Yes.
Who's going to go
yeah.
back and read all the book? But once they see those, and especially from entertainment, you are bringing that the education. So I can seriously see that my great granddaughter seeing it in the Parvati, seeing it in the classroom, and oh yeah, something. My mom, Kerala, elephant.
And I've been so lucky. I've actually spoken in my grandson's class both my granddaughter's class and my grandson class, once in Germany and once in Houston. And it's really exciting because the kid gets so excited. And then he's saying, that's my grandma. He's 6 years,
Exactly.
6 years old, that's my grandma. And then you go out there and you talk about the book, and it's very, very special. I truly see this as a privilege. I'm very fortunate that I have had an opportunity not only to write, but to share, to engage with children, to bring whatever. I mean, so many people are talented. It's just that I'm putting the effort into putting it out. So, it's not that I have something that others don't, but I'm working hard. And when I'm in India, you won't believe it, I'm literally every other day I'm in a new place. I'm running from place to place, from classrooms to classrooms, from schools to schools, all over the country. And in some ways, as I told my mother, my mother gets very excited. She says, you are traveling all over, and I bring back flowers and give it to her. And I said, it's such a privilege. It's such a lucky thing that this has happened and that she's had a chance to see it before she goes. So I'm very grateful. I don't take it lightly. I'm very grateful, and thank you. It was a pleasure to sort of share this.
And our great grandkids are going to say she's looking like my grandma, right? So wishing you all the best for writing a lot of variety, about
Yes,
Kerala
please do check
villages,
out my books.
Kerala villages, Kerala festivals, Kerala food.
Yes.
I'm visualizing all the storybooks for the kids. So please invite John Kodian, the president of Sargavedi, to honor her.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Yes, John.
Thank you.
John called me from India. I got a mysterious call that I wasn't sure if I should answer. And then he wrote a WhatsApp message and said, "I'm so and so. It's not a spam call."
Yeah. So I had to convince you, right? That it's a
Because I contacted you first, then I thought, no, it's not from, I contacted you in the FB, then at a moment I thought no,
But you didn't give any
no,
details.
because it's not
you
me.
just sent a
It
friend
has to-
request, I think. right?
No, I talked to you in the Facebook Messenger.
All right.
Then I thought it has to come from the president.
So it was wonderful talking to you at that time. It was non-stopping going on.
Yes.
But you were a good corporation.
You have to
So
hand over.
thank you for everything.
Let me take one more picture. I forgot that you didn't hand over.
Thank you.